She was the daughter of a Holy Roman Emperor, the angelic star of Velázquez's masterpiece, Las Meninas, and the future empress of Europe's most powerful dynasty. But Margarita Teresa of Spain was essentially born with a death sentence. It wasn't an assassin or a plague that stalked her, but something far more intimate, her own royal blood. This is the tragic story of how the Habsburgs' obsession with genetic purity turned one of their brightest princesses into a sacrifice, dooming her to a life of suffering and an early grave. In the mid-17th century, the House of Habsburg was an absolute powerhouse. They were a sprawling, continent-spanning empire built not on conquest, but on a relentless and frankly genius strategy of marriage. Their motto, "Let others wage war, you, happy Austria, marry," was the engine of their dominance. They had woven a web of power that stretched from Madrid to Vienna, controlling thrones and territories with wedding rings instead of swords. Into this world of immense power and suffocating prestige, on July 12, 1651, a princess was born, the Infanta Margarita Teresa. She was the first child of King Philip IV of Spain and his second wife, Mariana of Austria. From the moment she was born, she was a symbol of dynastic hope. Her father, Philip IV, called her "my joy," and contemporaries described her as a lively, pretty child, nicknamed the Little Angel. She grew up in the gilded but rigid world of the Queen's chambers, surrounded by a legion of ladies-in-waiting and tutors who schooled her in the suffocating etiquette of the Spanish court. But behind this facade of royal perfection lay a dark and dangerous secret. The Habsburgs' greatest strength, their unity, was also their most fatal flaw. For generations, they had practiced a deliberate policy of inbreeding, marrying within the family to consolidate power and keep their vast inheritance from falling into foreign hands. Cousins married cousins, and uncles married nieces. Margarita Teresa's own parents were a prime example. Her mother, Mariana, was also her father's niece. This obsession with blood purity had a simple, arrogant logic. The Habsburgs believed their blood was divine, superior, and that to mix it with outsiders would be to dilute its power. They saw their dynasty as divinely appointed to rule, and preserving their bloodline was nothing less than a sacred duty. They meticulously crafted family trees to ensure each union reinforced their grip on Europe, but in doing so, they were unwittingly engineering their own biological collapse. They didn't know about genetics, but they pressed on, ignoring the mounting, and very visible, evidence of a gathering storm. That storm had a name, a visible marker that haunted the faces of Habsburg royalty: mandibular prognathism, better known as the Habsburg jaw. It was a severe deformity characterized by a jutting lower jaw, a prominent lower lip, and a long nose. In countless family portraits, this genetic signature is unmistakable, a physical manifestation of their unnatural marriage practices. Modern science has since confirmed what court observers could only whisper about. The Habsburg jaw was a direct result of centuries of inbreeding. The science is as simple as it is chilling. To put it in perspective, a person normally has 32 distinct ancestors in their fifth generation. Margarita Teresa had only 10. Her younger brother, Charles II, was even more inbred. His genetic makeup was more similar to a child born to a brother and sister. This extreme lack of genetic diversity meant that recessive genes carrying harmful mutations, which would normally be masked, were expressed with devastating frequency. The dynasty that sought to purify its blood was, in reality, concentrating its own defects. While Margarita Teresa didn't suffer from the severe disabilities that would plague her younger brother, the physical signs were there. Portraits reveal the characteristic Habsburg jaw, a feature she shared with her future husband, Leopold. But the more insidious consequences were hidden. The inbreeding that defined her lineage also led to high rates of infant mortality, miscarriages, and a general fragility that haunted the family. Of her full-blooded siblings, only her younger brother Charles survived to adulthood. And Charles himself was a tragic figure from birth, unable to speak until he was 4 or walk until he was 8, his own jaw so deformed he often swallowed food without chewing. Every child born into this dynasty was a gamble. Every fever, every illness was watched with a mix of parental concern and cold political calculation. Margarita, though healthier than her brother, was a carrier of this fragile legacy. She was born into a golden cage, but the bars were made of her own DNA. Margarita Teresa's life was never her own. It was a strategic asset, a bargaining chip in the great game of European power politics. The main goal of her existence was to bind the Spanish and Austrian branches of the Habsburgs against their common enemy, the rising power of France. After her older half-sister Maria Teresa was married off to King Louis XIV of France, the 5-year-old Margarita became the dynasty's backup plan, the key to its future security. Her destiny was sealed with her betrothal to her own maternal uncle and first cousin, Leopold I, the Holy Roman Emperor. He was a deeply serious man, known for his piousness, his love of music, and his own prominent Habsburg jaw. He was also 11 years her senior. To formalize this and let the emperor watch his future bride grow, her father commissioned a series of portraits by the court painter Diego Velázquez. These weren't just artworks. They were political progress reports sent from Madrid to Vienna. The most famous of these, Las Meninas, places a 5-year-old Margarita at the center of the universe, a luminous child oblivious to the fact that her image was already serving the cold arithmetic of empire. After years of delays, the time finally came. In the spring of 1666, the 15-year-old Infanta began her long journey from Madrid to Vienna to become the Holy Roman Empress. The journey was an arduous, months-long spectacle of Habsburg power. On December 5, 1666, she made her formal entry into Vienna, and the wedding took place 7 days later. The celebrations that followed were among the most magnificent of the entire Baroque era. Leopold, eager to impress his young bride, spared no expense. For her birthday, an opera, Il Pomodoro, the Golden Apple, was staged, a production so lavish it featured 24 distinct sets, spectacular machinery, and a massive equestrian ballet. But beneath all the pageantry, a quiet tragedy was unfolding. The 15-year-old empress was a stranger in a strange land. She clung fiercely to her Spanish customs, surrounding herself with her native retinue and barely learning to speak German. This created a deep cultural rift. The Austrian courtiers, resentful of the arrogance of her Spanish attendants, grew to dislike her, openly hoping the fragile empress would die so Leopold could remarry. She was isolated and homesick, trapped in a marriage that, while reportedly affectionate, was a political contract. Contemporaries noted that despite the age gap, the couple developed a fondness for each other. She called him Onkel, and he called her Gretel. They shared a love of music and art, but affection couldn't change her reality. She had one all-consuming job: produce a male heir. The 6 years of Margarita Teresa's marriage became a relentless, body-breaking nightmare. Her life, from age 15 to 21, was consumed by a brutal biological mandate. She became pregnant almost immediately, beginning a devastating cycle that shattered her already fragile health. Between 1667 and her death in 1673, Margarita endured at least 6 pregnancies. For almost the entirety of her marriage, her body, which was still developing, was under the immense strain of either carrying a child, recovering from birth, or grieving a loss. Her first son, Ferdinand Wenzel, was born in 1667, but the joy was brief. The infant died before his first birthday. The loss was a devastating personal blow, but the court gave her no time to mourn. The pressure for another heir was immediate. In 1669, she gave birth to a daughter, Maria Antonia, who would be her only child to survive into adulthood. But a daughter wasn't the male heir the dynasty demanded. The cycle continued. A son born in 1670 died on the day of his birth, and another daughter born in 1672 died just days later. Each loss was not just an emotional trauma, but a political failure in the eyes of the court. The physical toll was catastrophic. Her health visibly deteriorated with each pregnancy. She was plagued by severe headaches, a persistent cough, and a constant draining fatigue. The court physicians were useless, while her body wasted away. She was frequently bedridden, but still forced to appear at formal functions, maintaining the facade of imperial dignity even as she was dying. In her grief and desperation, Margarita Teresa developed a dark conviction. A devout Catholic, she came to believe that her miscarriages and the deaths of her sons were divine punishment for the presence of the Jewish community in Vienna. She pleaded with her husband to expel them, believing it was the only way to save her future children. In 1670, Leopold tragically appeased her, ordering the destruction of the Vienna synagogue and the expulsion of the city's Jews. It was a desperate act born of a young woman's immense suffering, a futile attempt to fight an enemy she couldn't see. The real curse wasn't external, it was in her blood. By the beginning of 1673, Margarita Teresa was critically ill. Just 2 days after a confessor was called to her bedside on March 12, 1673. Margarita Teresa of Spain, Holy Roman Empress, died. She was just 21 years old and 4 months into another pregnancy. An autopsy would later suggest she had bronchitis, but her body, weakened by the endless cycle of pregnancies, had finally just given out. Leopold was said to have grieved deeply for his only Margareta. But the demands of the dynasty were relentless. With only a young daughter as his heir, the succession was dangerously fragile. Just 4 months after Margarita's death, Leopold married again to another Habsburg cousin. The imperial machine, indifferent to personal loss, moved on. Margarita's tragedy didn't end with her. The genetic curse she carried was passed down. Her only surviving child, Maria Antonia, would also die young, and none of Maria's children survived childhood, ensuring Margarita's direct line vanished completely. Her life was a grim foreshadowing of the dynasty's ultimate fate. The Habsburg strategy of inbreeding would reach its horrifying climax just a few decades later with her brother, King Charles II of Spain. His frail, disabled existence and his inability to produce an heir would plunge the continent into the War of the Spanish Succession and extinguish the Spanish Habsburg line forever. The very strategy designed to preserve their power was the one that guaranteed their extinction. The story of the Habsburgs is a stark reminder that history is made not just by politics, but by human biology. If you find these forgotten histories fascinating, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories of the world's most powerful families. Margarita Teresa was a pawn in a game she was born to lose. Immortalized as the innocent child in Las Meninas, her real life was a horror story of exploitation, suffering, and dynastic cruelty. She was born to serve an empire, her body treated as a vessel for its ambitions, her health sacrificed at the altar of bloodline purity. Her story is a heartbreaking testament to the human cost of obsession, a cautionary tale of a dynasty so convinced of its own superiority that it literally bred itself into oblivion. The bright princess, the little angel of the Spanish court, was ultimately just another victim of the Habsburg curse, a girl whose life wasn't truly lived, but consumed